reassuring look at the courtroom in Boston. Empty seats there, the jury obviously still deliberating. We'll be back there should anything happen.
But now let's actually go outside the courtroom where our correspondent Jonathan Hunt has been following the case. Jonathan, we've been talking about nail-biting atmospheres and cutting tension with a knife. And for the media pack following this, it must be very similar. You're in and out of there all the time as well, wondering what's happening.
Absolutely, everybody here is on tenterhooks waiting for this jury to come back from room 1248 and deliver their verdict. The media pack that has been following this trial has built up hugely in the 3 weeks since we were here and we started showing it live. All the British media have now arrived in Sky's wake, and all the American media, the national media, have now arrived here as well. It started off obviously as a local story of huge interest, but the national media has picked it up, and every single one of the big television networks here, all the big newspapers are here. Everybody is fascinated by this story, not just, I think, because of the twin tragedies of Matthew Eapen's death and the unfolding tragedy of Louise Woodward and the possibility that a 19-year-old could be sentenced to life in prison, but also, I think, because of the childcare issues that it raises in America. Now, you might be aware that last week at the White House, Hillary Clinton hosted a childcare conference. It is a very big issue indeed right across this country in the modern world, with so many families with both parents having to go out to work. Childcare has become one of the hot-button issues, and this is every parent's worst nightmare, of course. So it's raising that issue as well, and it really has gripped this nation as it has gripped Britain.
Over here, our legal experts were extremely surprised that the Eapens gave that television interview on American television last night. How did that go down there with you?
Well, the point of that was that the jury has been sequestered. They aren't being allowed to watch any television that has any reference to this trial. They aren't being allowed to read any newspapers or any articles about the trial. So the CBS lawyers, that was CBS Television, who carried out that interview, they checked it very carefully, and they were told that there was no problem in doing it because the jury was sequestered. They were actually going to pull the interview if there had been a problem. But it did raise a few eyebrows, and not just because of the fact that they were talking before the verdict came out, but I think to some people it was slightly odd that the Eapens left the court here at lunchtime our time yesterday and flew to New York to do that live interview. In other words, they were gone for the whole afternoon, and nobody knows obviously when this jury is going to come back. So they could have been in New York filming a live television interview when the jury actually came back into the courtroom. And I think some people found it slightly odd that they didn't want to be, if not even in the courtroom, not even in Boston itself, when the verdict finally came down.
Despite that, they obviously took a gamble. Did it change people's mood, people's attitude towards them, general public's view?
I don't think it really did. I think opinions here have been pretty set now for the last few days at least. Certainly opinions have changed since the trial opened. Then I think there was a great deal of sympathy for the Eapen family and not much sympathy for Louise Woodward. We've certainly seen a shift in attitude there. A lot of people now, the majority in fact of Bostonians when polled recently, did not believe that Louise Woodward was responsible for the murder, and a majority equally believed that the Eapens should have taken more care in their choice of childcare. They did, after all, employ an au pair at the cheaper end, shall we say, of the childcare market. Louise Woodward was paid around £70 to £80 a week, depending on the currency rates. So it certainly was cheap childcare for 45 hours a week of looking after two very young children. And it's been one of the undercurrents throughout this trial, and it's been, in fact, building up to be more than an undercurrent now. There is some outrage, I would even say, among some people in Boston that the Eapens chose that route for childcare, and certainly there is a mood here to blame the parents to some extent, be that fair or not.
Jonathan Hunt, thanks very much indeed.
Now let's just take a live shot of the Barry Sheck, the defence lawyer, is in the court. Whether that is of any great significance, we don't know at the moment. Michael, the jury obviously showing a lot of interest in the head injury and that extraordinarily detailed defence and prosecution evidence. That could be the only stumbling block, presumably.
Well, that should really be the determinative issue. because we've said that at the end of the day there's only really two issues in it. Louise's explanation of what happened and the medical, clinical explanation of what the injuries showed. Now, if the injuries are not the product of trauma on that day, of an attack on that day, but are consistent with the defense case of a subdural hematoma rebleed, of an unfortunate, unexplained, unexplicable, but not uncommon, reoccurrence of an earlier injury, then that's the end of the case.
Right. Well, we're looking at the courtroom now, Michael. I mean, there is a defence lawyer, but we've had so many false alarms. This could mean what? Another question to the judge, or what? I
wonder, because Barry likes to pace around a lot, and he's obviously got in there for some reason. No one else seems to have gone with him. Oh, there may have been a note from someone there.
Going to get his mail.
And that is that may be the prosecutor standing in front of the camera, because he's a tall man.
Well, they're both defence lawyers, though.
Andrew Good. They're both looking at some sort of note.
I mean, it wouldn't be a direct question from the jury. It always goes for the judge, doesn't it?
I would expect so, because the prosecution coming back as well, it suggests to me, Bob, that really something has happened, either in the form of a note which has gone to the judge and then been passed down to counsel to consider.
Well, we'll certainly stay with this while there's some activity there. I mean, it looks as though it doesn't have that feeling of urgency of the jury coming back, does it? It has a feeling about another question maybe that the jury wants to put to the judge.
I strongly suspect that when we come to the moment of the actual verdict being given, you'll be able to cut the atmosphere in that courtroom with a knife, and you'll be able to see the tension on both sides written in the faces of the lawyers. That will be the first really clear indication. There'll be no casual conversation or informal discussion between either sides. It'll be rigid attention, waiting, looking at that door, waiting for those 12 people to come back.
I suppose they must feel, as you said earlier on, the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, not least because it's such a high-profile case, attracting so much comment and claim and counterclaim.
Yes, the job of the lawyers is not just to turn up in court and ask a few questions and make some emotional statements. They will have planned and plotted both the prosecution and the defense over periods of months. Late nights, rethinks, reconsiderations of how to do it, how to approach it, and they bet with Louise's life. That's the unfortunate, callous way. They place their professional skills and thoughts on the line by advising Louise on the defense side that we think we can and we have done enough to allow you to choose the option of standing and resisting the first and second degree murder or being acquitted, and not giving the jury the much, much easier option of manslaughter. Now that takes consummate professional skill and confidence in your skill. The legal equivalent of the surgeon who has to open the skull and perform the operation. There's very little room for doubt in these sort of situations. It's just too serious.
Well, we'll keep an eye on this, obviously, and let you know as soon as anything happens that is interesting or crucial. In the meantime, Fiona.
Thank you, Bob. Now, earlier we were speaking to Jonathan Hunt from America, and he was saying that this trial has had a huge knock-on effect for parents, a wave of panic hitting many parents, both sides of the Atlantic, who use childcare. Well, now joining us in the studio is Jenny O'Neill from the nanny agency Tiny's UK, that also has an international branch which runs an au pair scheme in the United States. Thanks for joining us in the studio, Jenny. How do you start by vetting people who say they want to look after children?
I think it's very important, actually, and this case has highlighted the importance of clarification between the different types of childcare. And Tiny's has been in the childcare business now for 22 years, and we find constantly we haven't actually come very far in terms of people understanding the difference between nannies, au pairs, mothers' helps, childminders. The whole thing tends to get very jumbled. But In fact, it is very easy. Somebody who is a nanny is somebody who has done a recognised childcare course and has a recognised childcare qualification. The most commonly recognised, of course, is the NNEB, and most of the well-recognised courses involve 2 years training in childcare with both theoretical and practical aspects to it. So that is a nanny, and that's the only person that can be called a nanny, somebody who has actual practical, theoretical, and has been examined and shown competent to look after children. And she is somebody who is very well aware of children's developmental needs, of their physical needs, of their nutritional needs, and she's not somebody, as in Louise's case, who would have needed very definite guidelines as to how to look after children.
We ought to say, though, at this point, that just because you're unqualified doesn't mean you're going to be less able or not as good with particular children or within a particular family.
No.
In this country, most au pairs work with mothers, don't they, so that they're a help to the mother. They're not having sole responsibility for the children, and this is why many American parents there's been a backlash against the EPANs themselves, because they're saying, why are two professionals here working full-time employing an au pair of this nature?
That's right. And I think what I was going on to say is that you then go on to the unqualified classifications. And one of those classifications is the Au Pair in America scheme, which is not the same as the au pair scheme as we know it in this country. It is very much a scheme that has been licensed by the American government to facilitate intercultural exchange as well as employment in childcare. And that's a very essential difference, because the scheme is actually very well structured and very well supported towards that end. I'm not prepared to speculate whether things went wrong in this situation with the EPAN family, but it is actually a scheme that is usually very carefully monitored, and they do try and match the skills of the person who is going to help the family in childcare with the requirements of the family, and that usually is the case.
Very briefly, though, Jenny, do you need agencies to help families find the sort of help suited to their family, whether that be a nanny or an au pair or some other, a childminder?
I think it's absolutely essential, and I think what people must remember is that most agencies work on a principle where they don't charge the client or the nanny. They never charge the prospective nannies. So it's a free service. It only becomes a service that's paid for when somebody has actually said, I really like this person, I've seen all her references, I'm happy with her background, I'm happy that she's got the experience that she can suit my children in their care.
And in the majority of cases, does it work?
And in the majority of cases, it works very well.
Jenny O'Neill, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Well, back for a quick look at the Boston courtroom, relatively deserted. We can't see whether the defence and prosecution people have actually left, but we are keeping, I can assure you, a very, very close eye on proceedings there. Should anything happen, with some people going back into the public gallery, whatever that means, we're not sure, but don't worry, we have our eye on it. Now, joining us in our central London studio is Tricia Pritchard from the organisation Playpen. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Now, you actually started your organisation, as I understand it, after the Louise Woodward case broke.
That's right, that's when it was launched. It was actually launched in July this year.
And why?
Well, as a direct result of the Louise Woodward case. The nanny registration, however, the campaign is at least 10 years old, but Playpen was set up by Cheryl Winton, who is the parent of a child who was brain damaged 22 years ago by a nanny. So Cheryl, when she saw the news reports of another incident 22 years on, was quite clearly horrified that all this time has passed and a similar incident could happen again.
Well, we must make it absolutely clear that no one has found Louise guilty, so maybe she was a very good au pair with just the odd staying out late at night.
I think
tell me what you're really worried about is that there are some awful nannies and some awful au pairs wandering around. Is that what you're saying?
No, it highlights that nannies, au pairs, good, bad or indifferent, are not registered, they're not regulated, they're not subject to police checks, and their practice goes unchecked. And that's where we are very concerned. We're also concerned for nanny agencies and au pair agencies. They're no longer regulated. So the position at the moment is that anyone can call themselves a nanny and anyone can set up a nanny agency.
Now, you must be doing this because you've had some examples of nannies who haven't done their job properly?
No, like I say, the nanny registration campaign is at least 10 years old. We want the children cared for in their own homes offered the same protection as children cared for elsewhere in schools, nurseries, playgroups.
Do you actually find that people are complaining about the standard of nannies?
Not so much that. I don't think people are fully aware of the differences between nannies, au pairs and mothers' helps. People are confused. As I say, anyone can call themselves a nanny. We'd like to see that only qualified nannies can use that title. After all, you can't call yourself a teacher or a nurse or a doctor if you're not qualified. So there is the confusion because it's not regulated.
Sounds very reasonable. Tricia Pritchard, thanks very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
As you can see, there is some activity once again in the courtroom in Boston. We will be there again in a very few moments.
Orange understand that some people like to share. TalkShare Plus lets 2 or more people share one talk plan, one bill, and cheaper calls. The future's bright. The future's orange.
Now let's go back to the courtroom. Things are happening.
Dr. Liesner was on the stand for the better part of 2 days, so it's obvious that the transcription of all his testimony is impossible. I don't mean impossible in absolute terms, I mean impossible as a practical matter for present purposes. I can tell you that I have 2 references in my notes which do not purport to be stenographic or all-inclusive. One to the word serum explicitly and one to straw-colored fluid. Now, Ms. Goldberg tells me that she can probably, without a great deal of expenditure of time, locate those 2 particular items. I just mention all this by way of a preliminary to what suggestions any of you may have. Mr. Young?
Judge, I would suggest they are told that they rely upon their memory and the notes that you allow them to take during the course of this testimony.
Your Honor, your notes are exactly in sync with ours. We can locate exactly the point in terms of, what is it, the morning of
October 20th and October 17th was the first reference.
yes, that is a...
And October 20th was the second. I emphasize these are just the judge's notes, not...
There are 2 references.
Not anything stenographic.
I understand,
or
but
official.
in terms of finding it, the first reference had to do with the witness was looking at Exhibit 27, the picture of the CAT scan.
I don't think we need to get into it, Mr.
Right. Then there was a reference on cross-examination where Ms. Coakley asked him about it, and there is a possibility of a 3rd reference that Ms. Coakley and I discussed where I have a recollection of it as well, that she might have shown Dr. Lietzma a copy of Dr. Jean's book and asked him if he was familiar with references on page 86. And he said no, and that was the end of that. So those are, I believe, all the references. And it would be our position, Your Honor, that the court reporter, since the jury has given us a note where they say this is critical, that it would be our request that the court reporter go through the testimony in order to find all references to serum or the straw-colored fluid. And
well, she can't go through all the testimony, Mr. Scheck. It's almost 2 days worth of testimony.
Well, I think that we have. I think we can direct. We know that virtually all of it did not concern those questions on the direct and cross. We know it because we know what the subject matter was. It was those boards and his qualifications, and we know exactly where these references occurred. And I don't think there's much real dispute about that among the parties. So we would be in favor of doing whatever is possible to be responsive to the jury's question, particularly since they've indicated it's critical.
On the assumption that Ms. Goldberg can locate those two references and transcribe them sufficiently so that she can then read them to the jury. What, Mr. Leone, is the objection?
Your Honor, I'll defer to Attorney Coakley because she handled the cross-examination.
May I address that briefly, Your Honor? Mr. Scheck just indicated that he didn't believe there was a dispute as to the parties as to where that issue was addressed by Dr. Liesma. But my own recollection is that at least once, if not twice, in the course of my cross-examination of him, that issue came up, that is, about the appearance of serum, what it meant, and couldn't it also mean that it was a hyperacute subdural hematoma? There was a reference to Dr. Jean's book, and there were questions about whether, aren't you aware that Dr. Jean says that a hyperacute subdural hematoma can have serum extruded? So therefore, there was the problem with this, of course, is that without the entire transcript or a good portion of it, it's relatively impossible to say we can go here and give them a response to their question. And I think at this stage, for us, and Mr. Leone and I have discussed that, to have her go back and try and find this is an enormous task, will take an enormous amount of time, and will invite, it's a separate issue I know, but will invite down the road particular inquiries. The jury was told that they could take notes and that they were to rely on their opinions. And
on their opinions?
I'm sorry, on their notes and on their memories, and whatever opinions they are now forming. But this goes beyond what I believe we can do in a responsible way. And I would disagree with Mr. Scheck's characterization that it's an easy matter and the parties agree on where this came up in Dr. Liesma's testimony.
Well, it certainly is an easy matter, or a relatively easy matter, to identify in the reporter's notes the two matters that I happen to have a note on. That's not a problem. Question is, with respect to other material in the record, let me see you at sidebar for a minute.
Well, obviously they want to discuss that further, so they're going off into the little room to have a chat. Is that right?
Going off to the sidebar, Bob, now this is a very crucial moment. What appears to be happened is that a further note has been sent by the jury indicating that their earlier request to see Dr. Liesma's evidence, the defense pathologist's evidence, about the question of serum is not something that they would like, but it's something that is critical to their decision. The judge has found in his notes two references to the question of serum. The defense agree, and perhaps the third. The prosecution are suggesting there may be more in cross-examination. Now, the judge is now trying to decide what can they do. Can they give them the parts of the transcript that probably can easily be identified, the morning of the 17th of October and the 20th of October references we've heard about? Or does he simply rely on the prosecution, who yet again, Mr. Leone is saying, don't give the jury the evidence that they want. Let them rely on their own recollection. Now, the jury have indicated this is critical, and we've talked about the importance of serum, and you heard Martha Coakley there emphasize what the alternative from the prosecution was, that you could get serum in an acute, hyperacute injury, if it was so severe and happened so recently, you could get the same effect as if it was happened in the past.
But I mean, you would agree with the jury. This is the crucial aspect of the case, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's quite reasonable. They might say, let's reread the notes, and the judge says, well, we haven't got the ability to do it here. It sounds a bit odd, doesn't it?
Well, let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Imagine we're in the jury room, and we've sat and considered the CT scan, the bone window, as to whether or not there's swelling in the occipital region of the back of the head, an hour and a half or 2 hours after, does the prosecution say, Matthew was slammed against a hard surface. And they conclude, well, maybe the swelling wouldn't have arisen in that time. So maybe we can't rely for sure on that. So they then turn to the question of what the doctors found when they opened up the skull. So they found, Dr. Madsen said, serum. Then they turn to the issue, well, what is the defense's forensic pathologist, the man who cut up the juror and said, well, this wound indicates, or this healing process indicates an earlier injury. What's he saying about the serum?
Well, I mean, we had the defence lawyer, Barry Scheck, actually with this big picture of the bone window, and he kept saying, look at the bone window, end of case.
End of case.
No sign of a recent injury.
Yeah, but they may have taken the view, we're not prepared to look simply at one aspect of the clinical picture. We want to look, as we've been charged, with the whole aspect of the clinical picture. Let's list and discover and enunciate what Matthew's physical condition was on that day, and then try and back count and see which version, the prosecution's or the defence's, is most consistent with the contemporary evidence.
And the prosecuting lawyer, Martha Coakley, has a point here, doesn't she? Because she was saying that the cross-examination of Liesma was very important because she was trying to highlight a book written by somebody with a completely different opinion from Liesma.
By Dr. Jean, Elisa Jean, who she is, Martha Coakley is suggesting, Dr. Jean said in her book, that in certain kinds of extraordinarily acute hematomas, acute, hyperacute, the injury's been so severe, it's happened so recently, perversely or conversely, it may actually produce physical clinical signs that appear to be consistent with an old injury.
Well, put yourself in the mind of a juror, and you have a photographic memory, clearly, and you're skilled in dissecting evidence. Would you want to ask this sort of question after you've been sent to the jury room?
Well, I think once you become a lawyer, you lose all elements of humanity, and so you forget how people who have, you forget just how stressful and difficult it is being in that decision. So I think probably to answer it is, I think what they're doing appears to be logical. Looking at the clinical on the 4th of February, and then they're asking the questions, well, let's make sure that we know precisely what the doctors said about this thing. Not just precisely what we recollect, but now that we've focused through all these 3 weeks of evidence and we're getting down to the critical bits, let's make no mistakes as to the words used.
Look at that picture there, Louise looking at what appears to be a letter from home, looking at the envelope just now. It had...
I'll look about it.
Yeah, it's very, very sad, isn't it?
I've actually thought it was very moving each time they had a sidebar like this, that all the lawyers disappear and Louise is always sitting there on her own waiting for their return. In some ways, that's the most nerve-wracking, time that she has, because she's not surrounded by anyone at all, not even her defence lawyers. Michael, can I ask you, the jury, as we've said, are really doing what you've said they should be doing all this time, which is looking at the evidence and not being distracted by other issues. But is it not the case that both defence and prosecution could continue bringing in lawyers with different opinions, and you could carry on for days and days with having different views?
With the experts, within the limits. Now, the evidence has been given, and that's that. There was no rebuttal evidence to challenge the defence medical evidence. So what the jury are having to do is to resolve the question themselves. They haven't chosen simply to adopt what the defence may have thought they might have done, which is simply say, oh, we can't decide this issue. If there's a conflict between the medical experts, there's obviously reasonable doubt, and therefore that's the end of it. Acquit. That may indicate that there's two things. One is that some people are so influenced by the emotion of the way the charge is put and the seriousness of it that they're not prepared to take that shortcut route, and that's a good thing. And the converse is that some people are not influenced at all by the emotion, and are not prepared to take that shortcut route. And that's a good thing. The only thing I would say is that it's good the decision's been made on the evidence.
All right, we'll have a chat again in a moment or so. This is Live at 5 from Sky News. You've been waiting, we've been waiting, but for Louise Woodward, it's the longest wait of all. The jury, which will decide whether the British au pair is guilty or innocent of murder, is still deliberating. It's now been agonising for 17 hours, but there's still no decision. Let's go back to the courtroom there. In the public gallery there, you can see live pictures of people obviously waiting for something to happen. There's been this great deliberation between the judge, the defence and the prosecution about evidence that, that the jury wanted to have a look at. Now, our senior US correspondent, Jeremy Thompson, has been waiting for news at the court. He joins us now live. Jeremy.
Bob, well, I've been in and out of court all morning, joining those members of the public and fellow members of the media that you've been watching there on the benches in the courtroom on the 12th floor. As you said, the jury has now been out for just over 17 hours. And all we've really been able to conclude is those few moments when the jury have come back and asked for clarification on certain points of evidence, and from that we were able to see that they are focusing very heavily now on details of the medical evidence, which suggests that they, as you've been talking about, are trying to weigh up whether this was basically a new injury or an old injury that led to the death of Matthew Eapen. And my colleague Jonathan Hunt has been watching and following the reactions in that courtroom.
Another agonising day for Louise Woodward's parents, waiting for a verdict, praying that it will read not guilty. Under a gagging order, Miss Woodward's lawyers will say little, except to comment on their client's state of mind.
She's holding up pretty well.
But Miss Woodward is apparently finding the waiting difficult.
Wouldn't you? Yeah, I do.
The jury began their third day of deliberations by having some testimony read back to them.
Question. As you entered Matthew Eapen's skull, could you describe...
The words were given in evidence by this man, Dr. Joseph Madsen, the surgeon who treated Matthew Eapen. The jury, it seems, wanted to be clear on exactly what the doctor said about the fluid he found around the baby's brain, because, according to all the experts, the colour of that fluid might indicate the age of the injury. That, in turn, seems to suggest that the jurors who sit around this table are judging the case on the basis of medical evidence rather than emotional reactions to Louise Woodward. Miss Woodward herself, in the meantime, can do nothing but wait and wonder.
Jeremy, there's been extraordinary reaction here to the interview with young Matthew's parents, which appeared on American television last night. People are saying, you know, how on earth could this happen during the trial? But it's not unusual in America, is it?
No, of course, the words we're really waiting to hear are from Mr. and Mrs. Woodward and Louise, of course, if she's acquitted. But interestingly, the Eapens, Deborah and Sonny, seem to have got in first. They apparently sought the advice of their prosecution from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who said it was all right to go ahead with that interview. And they clearly felt that that their words and their thoughts and their view of this had perhaps been a little distorted over the last few weeks, and they wanted to have their say. And this is what they told Bryant Gumbel, the news presenter, on CBS last night.
You have, as we sit here, no doubt that Louise took Matthew's life.
That's correct.
Do you think she, quoting the law, acted knowingly and intentionally killed Matthew with malice?
I think she intentionally killed Matthew.
The defense has contended that the injury to Matthew's head was 3 weeks old. How do you view that charge?
It's totally ridiculous. There's no basis for that statement. It's just a big cloud of confusion to... It's a very Scheck approach.
I'm not being accusatory, but no way on earth, by accident.
Absolutely not.
No way.
Perfectly healthy.
A number of critics have made you out to be the villain. Did you ever expect that?
No, I was totally stunned. It's been one thing after another, one layer of shock on top of another.
I mean, everyone forgets Matthew. The focus is on Louise. And, you know, let's not forget, the poor baby died here.
He was a happy baby.
He was a great baby. Content, placid, wonderful, happy, laughing.
If she's found guilty, will you feel any better?
I think I won't feel better when I think about Matthew, but what I will feel is that the person that's been responsible for killing my son has been found responsible, and I think there's a certain satisfaction to that.
And if she's acquitted?
I guess I'll feel victimized again. She should be accountable for her actions, for her choices, and there's no one else responsible for his death but Louise.
Jeremy, highly emotional stuff there from Matthew's parents, but of course Louise's parents have been going through hell too, haven't they?
Indeed, I think it's a terrible time for both sets of families, whatever the rights and wrongs of this case, however it comes out in the end when the jury delivers its verdict. One can only imagine the tension, the pressure, the heartbreak that these families must be going through. And you can see, I think at the moment, Louise sitting, as she has so often over the past few days, alone on the defense benches. The lawyers come and go. They've got plenty of work to do, plenty of discussion to try and to keep this trial on track and to feed the jury with new information if it's needed. But Louise often sitting there just staring distantly into the far side of the court. Occasionally you've seen her trying to have a little smile with her parents, sometimes looking a bit glum about it all, occasionally just chewing her nails, brushing back her hair. She's wearing a new suit today, a khaki suit, and I think you can see the parents, well, we've got people coming back into the court again now. The parents, Gary and Sue would normally sit in the far corner there just behind her so she can lean over and look at them. On the face of it, they've looked generally quite composed, although I sense that Gary Woodward was looking distracted a bit today. He was, again, looking into the distance, didn't seem to be hearing what people were saying to him around. Sue Woodward looks, generally seems to be coping quite well, but I spoke to one of our colleagues from a British newspaper yesterday, who spoke to them yesterday, and she was telling me that the Woodwards really are having a very tough time. They're finding it very difficult to cope with the pressure and the tension and the waiting of all this. They are extremely concerned for Louise. They obviously, like the rest of us, don't know which way this is going to turn out. They're clearly convinced about her innocence, and they believe it's only right that she should walk free at the end of this. But of course, nobody knows just what those 12 men and women in the jury room think. I also gather there's the additional pressure that they have spent so much on this. The bills have been piling up at home, that their house in Elton in Cheshire has come under threat of possible repossession because they are struggling to pay their bills. They've obviously spent the money of coming over here. They've had to pay for flights. They've had to pay to keep themselves over here. And they are struggling with their bills. This is what I'm being told. And although the Defence Committee in Elton has been hugely supportive and helped them with their funds and so on, it's a very difficult time both emotionally and financially for the Woodwards.
Indeed, Mrs. Woodward was saying for the first time in her life she actually took a sleeping tablet last night and slept for 8 hours. The judge appears to be getting slightly impatient with the jury, doesn't he? I mean, these requests for clarification, he seems to be saying, well, you know, you've had oceans of evidence, you've taken copious notes, you've got to make your mind up.
Yes, well, right, very early on when the jury came back with their first question, the court rising at the moment, judge obviously coming back. I think this is further direction on the question of the evidence given by the defence expert, Dr. Jan Liesmer. You can see Barry Scheck there, the defence counsel, standing in court. That's Gerard Leone, the main prosecutor here for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're all watching the jury. Of course, you don't see the jury's faces at the moment. The jury filing in their 9 women and 3 men. Here's the judge.
With respect to our last request, hearing Dr. Liesmer's testimony regarding serum is critical to advance deliberations. We respectfully request that the testimony be transcribed so that we may hear it. Please give us an estimate of how long this would take. Have I read it correctly? Now, Dr. Liesmer testified for the better part of 2 days. Transcribing his testimony would take, I think I can fairly put it to you this way, quite a while. So we are really not in position to respond to your request. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you must decide the case on the basis of the evidence that you have. Remember, I said one way or another several times, that your job is to decide whether the government, on the basis of the evidence that you have heard, evidence that you believe, has persuaded you beyond a reasonable doubt of certain elements, certain things. And I need not go over them with you now. Now, if at any point in your consideration you are unable to determine, that is to say, you conclude that the government has not proved a particular element beyond a reasonable doubt, then your inquiry is at an end, because the government's obligation is to persuade you beyond a reasonable doubt as to each and every element. Now, if on the other hand, the government has persuaded you beyond a reasonable doubt of each and every element, then, as I said before, you answer the question by saying guilty. If the government has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt any particular element, then you answer the question by saying not guilty. It is really as simple as that. Right? Members of the jury, you may retire to complete your deliberations.
Jeremy, well, the judge there saying get on with it.
Yes, once again, of course, he said right at the start when the jury asked their very first question, he said you've got to focus. You've got to focus on the evidence that you have heard over the last 13 or 14 days. And he obviously has showed a little exasperation with them a couple of times over the questions they're asking. I think his concern may be that they're getting very bogged down with some of the evidence which may not necessarily prove what he is now trying to redirect them yet again to say, that you've got to decide whether the prosecution has proved murder 1 or murder 2 beyond a reasonable doubt. And as he said there, I mean, it's relatively simple. Are there too many doubts for you, or do you believe this? Do you believe the prosecution case? And you sense that he's worried that they've sort of muddied and clouded the water a bit and gone off perhaps in the wrong direction, and that he obviously feels maybe they haven't been listening as closely as they should have done during the earlier evidence. They're having to go over it time and again. So it's quite interesting whether that will stiffen their resolve. Those firm words from the judge, we'll see.
Jeremy, for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
And now let's go back to the Rigger Public House, where our correspondent Gary Cottrell is there with the friends, family and supporters of Louise Woodward. They've been watching the whole trial live on Sky News from the Public House. Gary, what's the atmosphere like there each time the judge comes back into court and the expectation rises?
Well, you'll have to take us, as you find us, we can't move around an awful lot because this place is filling up now. Obviously, works have finished for the day, businesses are closing down, locals and supporters of the Woodwards are coming in. And every time there is some hint of movement in the court, the place falls silent, the volume on the big screen goes up, people sit there, wait, wonder, hope, fingers crossed, hands clasped, holding each other, tears sometimes, and then every time, of course, it is mostly another question from the jury to the court. Now, there's been cheers for the judges, as we've said, virtually saying, get a move on now, you know, you must get a move on, you must judge the evidence that you have, and that has been welcomed by people here, because they can see Louise. We saw Louise sat there all by herself, looking through what looked like an airmail letter from back home, getting tenser and tenser, just like they are here, but obviously here it's to a much lesser degree.
So they see it as a positive sign and continue staunchly to believe that Louise will be acquitted.
They've always thought that. They've seen nothing to change their mind. They are concerned that it's taken so long. They're relieved that the jury have been given a bit of a fillip by the judge, but they think that the time it's taking is to do with the jury, an intelligent jury we've heard from a city which is full of universities, full of intelligent middle-class people. It's just them being very, very careful, taking their time, considering all the evidence. Perhaps the judge seems to be getting a bit frustrated, perhaps considering it too deeply, but now they think that maybe the time is coming when with the words of the judge, they may soon come back with that verdict. You can see the place is filled up. I was told a story that when Louise was first arrested, she said to her parents, well, I hope this doesn't get into the Chester Chronicle, the local paper here, where we can see all the activity here today. It's got a bit further than that, hasn't it? Her best friend here is Kate Hagan. Very busy here, very tense here. You've seen that close-up of Louise. How do you think she'll be feeling? It's a bit of an obvious question, but you know her better than anybody.
Well, it's really surprising because she's just keeping so calm about the whole thing, you know. You look at her and she's just, you know, sat still, you know, taking everything in. You know, it's obvious she's taking everything in and just reading some letters, but she's just keeping very calm, and I can't imagine what must be running through her mind at the moment, but she's keeping it together and just, you know.
What's it been like for you, the closest to her, when we've thought that a verdict might be coming, but it hasn't quite?
It's really awful because like everyone is on the edge of the seat, you know, with fingers crossed and everything else crossed. And when we think something happens and, you know, it's a big letdown, it's just a nightmare because then it makes the atmosphere even more intense, and you wouldn't believe what it's like here at the moment. Everyone is so stressed out and just waiting for something to happen. And all we can do now is wait and wait and wait until something happens.
Also here, again, I've been here throughout, Debbie Layla, and also campaigning throughout on Louise's behalf. She used to babysit for your daughter, Georgina. We hear from the Woodwards. They contacted back home yesterday, saying that they were tired, tense, but still confident. That's reassuring, I suppose.
Yes, very positive. If they're as confident as that, then we remain. We never lost the confidence anyway. We just hope it comes soon. This is the main thing. And wherever Louise has gained that strength from, I wish we could have some, you know what I mean? She's doing marvellously.
Can I just ask you quickly about your reaction to Mr. and Mrs. Eapen giving an interview at this late stage in the case, at a time when the jury may have come back? They got on a plane, it appears, and flew to New York.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? It's the most incredible thing that we've ever seen in our lives. And when they were talking last night, the possibility of a retrial, of a verdict isn't made. Who in the whole wide world has not seen that interview now? How can there ever be a retrial? There's now... It's the most incredible situation we've ever seen, it really is.
Well, we keep to wait. We continue waiting, just like everybody else. Will it be moments away? Let's hope so.
Well, let's have a quick look now at the courtroom. Not an awful lot happening there at the moment. It seems the defence and prosecution teams have left. Michael McParland is still with us. That lady was saying in that pub, you know, how will this affect a retrial, this television interview with the parents?
That's an extremely perceptive point, if I may say so. It's a very good point. Everybody in America will be watching the exclusive Inside Edition, Bryant Gumbel, talking to the parents. Now, what are they going to say? Now, of course, the counterblast to that is, well, because the television evidence has been shown to the nation as well, that people will also be have seen the evidence and seen that a first jury cannot decide, and therefore there'll be a doubt in their minds. But I thought it was a very good point.
You saw a sort of little clash there between the jury and the judge. The jury insisting we want to see a transcription of certain evidence which we think is vital and we don't quite understand. The judge saying, you can't have it, it would take too long, get your memories working on the evidence as it was.
Well, the judge, and I do like the judge because he's handling it in a very nice way. He's very nice to the jurors.
Oh, he seems quite unsympathetic to me. If I was a juror, I'd be feeling a bit hassled at this stage.
What he had a problem, and that's why they retreated to this sidebar to discuss. And the problem was this: they thought they could identify two pieces of the transcript which could probably be found pretty quickly, but the prosecution was saying, "Oh no, there's more. There's more questions." And as a rule of evidence, a basic principle, you can't put in part of the relevant evidence and leave out the other bits. So the judge was faced with a debate with the defense saying, well, if you can find two of the important bits, let's put them in for obvious reasons. And the prosecution saying, no, whoa, leave it alone. The judge had to make a decision because either way he could find him giving rise to an error of law which could give rise to an appeal on either side.
We've all been fooled about the sudden activity in the court. We think that's it. I mean, what are you reading into the jury being out all this time? Obviously, the stumbling block is that one little element of evidence, well, not one little element of evidence, but a crucial element of the evidence which they don't quite understand, they want to clarify, they want to check. What happens now the judge has said you can't have the transcription? Well,
I've been trying to read the judge's view of it. It started with when the judge actually put the option, the nous loose option to Louise. I suspect he didn't hesitate in accepting Louise's option. I suspect, and I don't wish any discourtesy, he thought that was the appropriate course for the defence to take. He obviously wasn't expressing an opinion. I wouldn't try and put any opinion on him. Now, faced with the prosecution saying you can't give this critical piece of evidence to the jury, the response he gave to the jury amounts to this, I think. Listen, you're never going to be able to decide this case on the medical evidence to any degree of scientific certainty. That's not your job. Your job is not to have an inquest into how and why
Just
Matthew
read the tea
died.
leaves, in other words.
Not to find precisely, to scientific certainty, why Matthew died. If you can't decide whether the elements of the charge have been made out, because you can't resolve the medical evidence, then you must acquit.
All right.
Sorry.
Not at all. No, for the time being. There's plenty more questions coming, don't worry. Just relax for a moment. Let's have a quick look at the court. Nothing much happening there. Clusters of people, as we've seen from time to time. But we have our eye on the place, I can assure you, and any suggestion of the jury coming back, for example, or another confrontation between the jury and the judge will bring you straight back into court.
In the meantime, other news. And police are investigating a house fire in Glasgow that left a young mother and her 3 children dead. Michelle Wilson, her daughters Jacqueline, who was 3, 2-year-old Katie, and 8-month-old Brian were all killed.
The fire started around 7:30 in the morning. The flat was engulfed in flames within minutes. Neighbours were awoken by the sound of one of the girls inside screaming.
That's kind of all you hear. Everything else that was going on, just her screaming at the top of her lungs, screaming. Not in the front, certainly around the back, so she must have been in one of the back bedrooms, screaming for her life, probably.
The local postman broke down the front door in an effort to reach those trapped inside, but was beaten back by smoke and flames. The man who escaped jumped from a first-floor window and shouted to neighbours, asking if they'd rescued the children.
It was just a boy I heard screaming, "If you go to Wayne's," and that's all I could hear was him. And I think the lassie was screaming like in the background, as you could hear her screaming. But as I say, you couldn't get past the smoke. It was just now far too thick to get by it. Couldn't even get in the first step of the door. It was just thick with smoke and flames.
It's understood the baby boy had been sleeping in his parents' bedroom. His mother took him into a rear bedroom where the 2 young girls were, but none escaped. All 4 were found together.
Look around the community this morning, you'll see that the people are devastated. They really are shocked. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy to happen to a community like this, with so many young children in the community.
Police say that investigations so far indicate there are no suspicious circumstances. Local residents of the 1960s housing estate say they're anxious to know what part compacted straw used in partition walls might have played in accelerating the blaze. James Matthews, Sky News, Glasgow.
More senior Tories lined up on either side of the Euro fence today. Former Deputy Prime Minister Michael Heseltine says only a nuclear war will stop the single currency going ahead. And the question over Britain joining is not whether, but when. The shadow cabinet policy, he says, is damaging the country and the party. But Paul Sykes, the millionaire Yorkshire businessman who financed Tory Eurosceptic campaigns, has left the party in disgust.
The former Deputy Prime Minister says the Tory leadership has made a fundamental error by ruling out the single currency, and his new group within the Tory party will campaign against it.
Those who decided to change the party policy in a way that is very clearly Eurosceptic, they must carry the responsibility for any splits that emerge. They knew perfectly well if they did it, they wouldn't take people like myself with them.
Former Chancellor Kenneth Clarke is also assuming a prominent role in what's becoming a formidable opposition to official Tory policy on Europe. Peter Temple-Morris, who was on the brink of crossing the floor to the Labour Party, has been persuaded by this to stay on board, saying that Mr Hague was mistaken, both in policy terms and perhaps also in allowing backbenchers to speak out.
We are following official policy because we've got a license to dissent from it on this particular aspect, which is very, very important. Some would say that's a fallacy of policy, but it does remain the actual position.
This, combined with Ian Taylor's resignation from the Tory front bench, has left the leadership on the defensive about its hardline commitment against the single currency.
It is now absolutely clear where we stand, and we know also what Labour want to do. Labour want to abolish the pound, and I relish a battle in which the Conservative Party is the party defending the pound and the Labour Party the party wanting to abolish it.
The Prime Minister, who entertained children at number 10 from the summer literacy schools, had discussions as recently as Monday with Mr Temple-Morris about his possible defection to Labour. Even though that has not happened, Mr Blair's own difficulties about the single currency have been totally overshadowed by internal Tory dissent. Judith Dawson, Sky News, Westminster.
Now, we will, of course, be returning to the courtroom in Boston as soon as there is any action there. At the moment, as you can see clearly, a handful of journalists, and in fact we can see Mr. Woodward, Louise's father, there standing talking to a couple of people, and the lawyers in the background. We will be returning as soon as anything happens, as I say. We'll be back in a moment, though, with more sport and weather.
Tonight, does television tip the scales of justice? Whatever the outcome of the Louise Woodward murder trial, critics argue the law is not best served by allowing live TV coverage. It's proved popular viewing, but at what cost? And should cameras be allowed as much freedom in Britain as they are in America? Call me, Frank Partridge, tonight on 0171 757 7070.
Morning.
Morning, Dad.
Oh, yeah, I must sort out that loan. Oh, but I can't get to the bank.
Hello! There's a more convenient way to get an unsecured personal loan.
Call Lombard Direct, free on 0800 215,000. 24 hours a day.
And what's more, there's now a special 1% discount off the APR on loans of £5,000 and over.
One call to Lombard Direct, and you're laughing.
To arrange a loan or for more information, call now, free on 0800 215,000.
The vacuum cleaner explained.
The cleaner sucks air through a bag. That's how it picks up dust.
I see.
What's happened now? Oh, the dust has clogged the bag.
Does that mean the cleaner can't suck properly?
Suppose it does.
Does that always happen?
Yes.
Oh.
Only one cleaner has no loss of suction. Dyson.
Well, of course, the main story of the day, of the week, is what's happening in Boston. Not a lot at the moment, but there have been exchanges between the judge and the jury. The jury wanted to examine certain aspects of the evidence, but the transcriptions weren't available, so there's a bit of a logjam there. They've gone back to deliberate and to think over the evidence, as the judge suggested, rather than rely on transcriptions after the event. Directly we have something, of course, we'll bring it to you.
And as well as pictures from Boston, we are also live from the Rigger Public House. Now, this is the pub in Louise's home village in Cheshire, where her friends and supporters are watching the trial live on Sky News. They're waiting, as we're all waiting, for a verdict.
Now, let's have a look at the weather. And another nice day today, Hazel.
Hello, well, if we take a look at tonight's chart, you can see that a lot more in the way of cloud around today, and that's actually introduced some slightly warmer temperatures in northern and western parts. Certainly we had much warmer temperatures there early on this morning. Now for tonight, we're going to find the frost really confined to the southeast, and even there we're not going to see frost everywhere, just patches here and there. Probably coldest out in East Anglia and the far southeast, where it could drop as low as -2 or -3. Elsewhere though, the cloud keeping temperatures up, but where the cloud breaks, we could get a touch of ground frost, or more likely we could get some patches of mist and fog forming. Bits and pieces of rain around still, but nothing really tending to dry out over the next few hours. And then for tomorrow, what's going to happen is, again, a good deal of cloud further to the north and the west, with some sunny breaks as well. But the southeast, after a frosty start, still seeing some good sunshine from time to time.
Hazel, thank you very much. An ideal climate for outdoor activity of one sort or another?
Sort of a round ball and a bit of kicking.
Toss it to you.
Good afternoon. The Football Association has been called on today to stop players betting on the game. A report on spread betting and gambling on the outcome of matches has been presented to the FA, and it calls for stricter disciplinary measures against professional players who break the FA's rules on gambling.
Betting on football now accounts for 10% of bookmakers' business. Punters can forecast results, scorers, even the times of goals and other incidents. Football clubs have encouraged the growth in gambling by allowing bookies to set up offices inside grounds. No one wants to stop the public having a flutter, but players have been trying to cash in too, even though it's been banned for half a century. The trial of Bruce Grobbelaar and others on match-fixing charges brought the matter into the public eye and led the FA to commission a report. It found that the widespread betting was due to either ignorance or blatant disregard of the rules, that it was damaging to the integrity of the game, that there was potential for corruption, though no actual examples were found, and that inside knowledge was no different to insider trading in the city.
The impression created by betting
on the part of those people to the public is just that, being unfair, suggesting a measure of sleaze about football, suggesting a lack of integrity, which are the very things that we are desperately concerned about and something that we're trying to remedy.
Sir John recommends a further clarification of the existing rule, as well as all professional players being given a copy of the rules so that they've got no excuse for their ignorance. But he also wants bookmakers to report offenders to the FA, something the bookies say isn't practical.
We're not so naive as to imagine that we could recognise most footballers if they walked into this shop anyway. And of course, one of the practical problems involved in a rule that prevents players and officials betting is that they could easily get somebody else to do it for them. So it would be very difficult practically to legislate against it.
The report found no evidence that betting influenced events on the pitch, including allegations that the ball was kicked out of play in this game after just a few seconds because of spread betting on the time of the first throw-in.
We have been asked on a number of occasions over the past 2 years, is there corruption in football? And we have made it absolutely clear that as far as we're concerned, there is no evidence of that. We have asked for evidence, none has been forthcoming. No one can say never, but we are as happy as we can be.
From today, footballers can no longer plead ignorance.